Revelation 2499. From the 7th of October 1942. Striving for light of one's own free will. Further development. Everything earthbound flows towards the light as long as it is not yet in the stage of free will. Consequently, it is in a progressive development upwards, for the spiritual, which shelters itself in the works of creation, is confronted with ever greater tasks which it has to fulfill, and thus the divine will is also constantly fulfilled through it. But in the last stage of the embodiment of the spiritual, God withdraws his will insofar as that he now lets the human being himself determine whether he wants to be active in service or not. Indirectly, his will determines the course of life of the last external form, the human being, but thereby only creating increased possibilities for him, which should stimulate him to be active in service. Nevertheless, the human being is free to carry out such an activity, for he can also live out his urge for activity in another way by carrying out an activity which never testifies to serving love but harms his fellow human being or only brings him an advantage. In that case the human being acts in opposition to divine will but is not prevented from doing so, since precisely this free decision of will is the purpose of the last embodiment on earth. But then the human being will not strive towards the light either, instead he will remain in the same state of development as at the beginning of embodiment, or he will regress, depending on whether his actions lack love or are entirely unloving. Thus, whereas higher development is guaranteed in the preliminary stages because the being serves in every work of creation, albeit in a certain state of compulsion, this is called into question in the final stage of higher development, for it depends on the human being's free will, on his desire for light which is expressed through his actions and thoughts. If the human being is capable of love he inevitably strives towards the light and develops progressively. The loveless human being, on the other hand, does not use his earthly path of life for the soul's further development, and thus this last path is completely useless for him. Yet he cannot be forced, since the free decision for good or evil is the meaning and purpose of earthly life, and therefore he must let his will become active himself without any coercion or influence. Yet divine will directs his course of life such that time and again he is offered the opportunity to be of service, but his free will not be curtailed, which is why one day he will also have to answer for his actions on earth as well as for their omission. Amen.